17 witness testimonies now, 6 hours of lawmaker arguments on Wednesday, a House vote to impeach the president. The 2 articles have not been transmitted to the U.S. Senate. Why do you remain steadfast in this approach?
Because we think this process ought to be fair. It should be transparency. Everybody in the country ought to be able to look in on this process and be proud of it. I do not see, and nobody in my caucus can see, how we can be proud of a process when we have 2 senators, one from my state of South Carolina, saying we aren't interested in any facts, we aren't interested in bringing any witnesses, we aren't interested in being fair. That is not anything that anybody in this country ought to be proud of. We have a process. We ought to go through that process. It ought to be transparent. It ought to be fair, and shouldn't have any semblance of a rigged system. There's been too much in the history of this country about rigging courts, just going through a process knowing full well that you have a preordained outcome. We should not have a preordained
And you're talking particularly
outcome.
because McConnell had said that this president, will not be found guilty if there's a trial, that there would be no witnesses called. That has been his view in the last 2 weeks.
That's exactly right. I have a history, and I think that most people who watch your show are familiar with that history. Mm-hmm. And for this leader of the Senate from Kentucky to be making such a pronouncement conjures up all kinds of things in my mind and many other people in this country. We ought to be about fairness, and that ought to be the way we go forward with this process.
So help some people understand the process, because the Constitution does say the House has the power to impeach, the Senate has the power to hold trial, but nothing in the Constitution, stipulates the length in the delay, in any delay in transmitting these articles. Is it possible that the articles are on indefinite hold, or is there a deadline?
Well, I try to liken this legislative process to our judicial process. Mm-hmm. We in the House of Representatives act as what we would call a grand jury. You have probable cause. You're looking to see whether or not there is reason to send something to trial. You don't have all your witnesses before the grand jury. You don't have the entire process before the grand jury. You're determining whether or not there's sufficient evidence to go to a trial. So that's what we did in the House. We found sufficient evidence to send this thing to the Senate for a trial. We were expecting, and still are expecting, the Senate to do its job, put on a full, fair trial, call the witnesses. We have put forth 4 witnesses that we think ought to be called. They may not want to put 2,
including
but you cannot
the
get 0
Chief of Staff,
and
Mick
then call it fair.
Mulvaney, and former NSA, John Bolton. Those are among the witnesses. If they are not called, if no witnesses are called, as Mitch McConnell has said, can you have a fair trial?
No, absolutely not. And I think Mitch McConnell knows that. I think Lindsey Graham knows that. But I don't think they're interested in fairness. They are interested in a charade. They want to go through a process, mark time, and declare an outcome that they've already decided what it would be. That is not the way you have a trial in this country. At least it should not be the way you have a trial. We are a nation of laws, not of 1 or 2 men. We are a nation of laws. We ought to live by those laws. We ought to have a process that everybody can be proud of. Nobody can be proud of this thing that Mitch McConnell has put forward. And I really believe that the American people need to speak up. I'm so glad that many of my people from the Jewish community are now speaking up about Stephen Miller. I was born and raised in the
asking that he resign
now,
or at least be removed. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. He should be. This guy is really a cancer on this country, not just this presidency. And the same thing is happening now with the evangelical community, the Christian community, I should call it. I was born and raised in the parsonage. I know what the Bible says about a whole lot of things. And it certainly ain't what Franklin Graham is saying. He must not be reading the same Bible that I have read and the Bible that his father preached from so much. So I really believe that Christians and Jews are now beginning to speak up about the misrepresentation that's taking place by a few people smerging these two great religions. And I think they are the two great religions upon which this country is found. Judeo-Christian principles means a whole lot to me. I tell people all the time, my favorite verse of the Bible is Micah 6:8, doing justice, loving mercy, and being humble. And I have a favorite over in the New Testament, Matthew 25:45. These two things, doing for the least of these. So Judeo-Christian principles are what we are built upon. They are being misrepresented by Franklin Graham and Stephen Miller, and it's time for Christians and Jews to speak out about this, and let's put this country back on an even keel.
And then let me ask you, too, as it pertains to the impeachment, House Speaker Pelosi, wants to delay these articles of impeachment, delay the naming of House managers, accusing the president and the Senate Majority Leader McConnell, of joining forces to go rogue. McConnell has said that he is working with the White House, that a Senate trial would happen, without those witnesses. And this was your point of view when asked earlier this week by my colleague John Berman on allowing this to go on as long as it takes. Take a listen.
How long are you willing to wait?
As long as it takes. Even if he doesn't come around to committing to a fair trial, keep those articles here. So keep it as long as it takes. If you know, and he's told you what he's going to do, it's almost like let's give him a fair trial and hang him. I mean, it's the verse of that.
So, Congressman, you're talking about McConnell saying, and I'm just going to reiterate what you said, he's told you what he's going to do. It's almost like give him a fair trial and hang him. It's the reverse of that. So you've heard since that the Trump campaign and others have used the words hang him to say, look, the Dems want to hang Trump. So, this is your first opportunity after that interview, to offer clarity for those who want to interpret what you said in one way. Clarity on your word choice, your intention.
Well, I don't know. You have to be very unintelligent to misinterpret what I said. The word reverse means reverse. The reverse of a fair trial and hanging is a rigged trial and acquitting. That's the reverse. And I said this is the reverse of that. Unfair trial, rigged trial, and acquitting. That's what that is. Now, I'm so sorry that people don't have enough respect for their own interpretations or their own intelligence to try to misinterpret that. In fact, I'm very, very pleased that Fox News has come out and says they are misrepresenting the congressman's words. I forgot, there's some very right-wing groups have come out and called them on this. And that is something to be proud of. So, I don't have a problem with conservatives. My parents were conservative, much more conservative than I am. I respect conservatives. I do not respect misrepresenters, and that's what these people are doing, misrepresenting the facts.
And is this just, in your view, emblematic of why there is so much, say, confusion that's being promoted? Because people might hear one thing, but there are others who tell them they heard something else instead.
Well, that's their intent. They're bullies. They're trying to intimidate. My goodness, what I've been through in this country, what I go through every day, you aren't going to intimidate me. They can attempt all they want to. I'm going to continue to speak out the way I know to speak out, the way I should speak out, to represent my constituents the way I should, and I'm not going to be intimidated by people who hide behind some tweet. That's what's going on in this White House, just tweeting out stuff that they know is not true. And these people are getting their signals from this White House. Stephen Miller is in the White House. Stephen Miller is the guy that's got us now celebrating Christmas with a loss of food stamps for hungry people. It's all coming from Stephen Miller, and we ought to call this stuff out. And I'm going to continue to call it out. If you put up a kangaroo court, I'm going to call it that. If you misrepresent SNAP and the food stamp laws, I'm going to call it that. I am not going to be intimidated by anybody in this White House or by anybody out in the blogosphere. I've lived too long to be intimidated by anybody.
Mm-hmm. Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina, thank you so much for your time. Again, have a great holiday. I know it's a working holiday as so much still work is being done.